Okay, it looks like it is 11:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll start with some housekeeping first. We are going to be answering questions at the end for everyone's benefit, but if you have a question that comes up during the webinar, please go ahead and ask it in the Q&A box. We will type responses throughout, and then at the end, if there's any questions that come in for the benefit of the group, we'll go over those as well. And just while we wait for everyone to join, I'm going to launch a poll just to see who we have online with us today. So what version of IndySoft are you currently on? Looks like the results are coming in. We have about 50% have voted, and wonderfully, about 65% are on our latest version 11. We do have some people on the earlier versions, but it does look like most of you are at the latest update, so that's really good. All right, moving on. This is who we have on the webinar with us today. Myself, Heather McGrath. I'm the marketing director for IndySoft. We have our co-founder and CTO, Rhett Price, Ben Sykes, our senior developer, and Mitch Jones, our sales engineer. Our agenda for today is to go over, obviously, the new features that are coming in version 12. Those are schedule defaults, software configuration management, advanced test points, new master types. We have a new IndySoft Excel clone, so you don't have to purchase those Microsoft licenses for Excel. Our automated text sync, which we previewed at our previous webinar and is now included in version 12. Specifications, and then we'll finish with our Q&A. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
So one new option we have in version 12 is with add edit companies. So say, for example, you would like to have a particular customer that has specific needs for scheduling their default intervals, maybe based upon an equipment type, also specific maybe due date settings. So to do that, you simply go to the company in question, press schedule defaults and interval adjustment. So let's say they wanted all their calipers set to a particular calibration schedule. We'll say by default, say 9 months. So whenever doing any sort of scheduling with this particular type of equipment, it will pick 9-month a base interval. You can also force that if you want. You can have a default and let someone change it or force it. We also have the standard enable auto scheduling for this particular type, and we have a new auto scheduling for failed calibration. So you can say if it fails one time, then decrease the interval by 20% or whatever. And then last, this is where you actually define what rule occurs. So for example, if I say type is exactly calipers, then it will only do this particular default for that type of equipment. So you can set up as many rules as you like there, and again, that's per customer. So normally we would have to do that with custom scripting, but this is a way to do that now directly in the system. Besides that, you also now have per company a way to skip certain days. Like say you want to skip weekends, you can pick annual days, specific days, and then you can have your automatic increase or decrease in calculated due date. So maybe if you want to go end of month for this particular customer, you can do that.
Hi, this is Ben, and I'm going to show you around our new config changes and locks utility. So we're excited about this. Let me go ahead and pull it up before I try to describe it. So from the home view, you can map a new hyperlink for config changes. And when that comes up, you can see there's a couple important concepts we're trying to tackle here. Changes to configuration, and then locking on particular configuration items. So the third tab here is just dedicated to settings. So anything I'm about to describe here related to changes and locks, just know there's probably a setting on this tab to turn that off if it ever goes too far for what you want in the system. So two main things we're trying to tackle here. The first one is changes to configuration. So there's so much that you can change in IndySoft, the look and feel of various alarms and reports and layouts and events. So now anytime a change is made, we're going to automatically take a snapshot of that config change and save it to the database here in case we ever want to go back and revert to that change. So we're going to know which user made that change, the date and the time, the type of configuration that they were modifying, exactly what the item was, and then probably require them to even input a note describing that particular change. So all of this out of the box is going to be set up automatically. So let me just demonstrate. Say you're in Print Builder and you want to make a change to a particular report. Let's just do a really simple one like this standard sticker that we're on here. So let's say on this sticker we're going to say we don't want this field to be bold anymore. So we'll make that important change to the database. So here's a new screen here. We're going to be prompted to describe this change. Made ID field non-bold. So at that moment we just made a backup of that particular config change to the database. So this is the description that was made. So now if we ever need to revert to that change, I'll describe that lock screen here in a second, then we can do that. So say a couple days later somebody comes in and makes a different change and they accidentally delete a particular field here, but they thought they were just making this last cal bold. So they save that to the database, but then you realize you're missing an entire field here. So this is the state of the particular sticker here. So now you can go back to the config changes utility and you can go to this previous change here when you know you had the sticker working correctly, and you can revert to that change. So when that happens, it makes a copy of that previous revision and makes that current in the database, gives you an automatic note about which revision was used, and then copies the original comment from that revision. So now we've restored that correctly in the database. So this is a great way for you to keep track of exactly who's making the different changes and give you some protection in the system. So on the left hand side here, obviously it's just some filtering for the different types of configuration. You can search these or filter them by a date range, to and from, or filter them by a particular user or across all users. So you can delete these revisions from the database, export them to a file, or revert to a past change. It's very nice also to be able to export these to file. This is the same zip format that we use for the export import module. So if you have maybe 2 or 3 different databases that you're using for IndySoft, maybe one for production and then development and test, this is a great way for you to target a particular revision and save it to an external file and bring it into another database. So this is just something that you can immediately import in from export import. So that's the changes side. Now on the locking, this is trying to solve a slightly different problem. So this is the same configuration groups we just described. This is trying to avoid any 2 users in IndySoft from trying to modify the same event, report, or layout at the same time. So if they did that in the past, then it's really the last user that makes their save to the database that's going to win. So with this new locking utility, then we're going to block that second user and say this is already being edited by another user in the system. So let's go back to that same sticker that we have up. So as soon as the first user pulls up this sticker and has it in an editable state in the system, then on the locking tab you can see that a lock is automatically made. So now if a different user came in and tried to modify this sticker, then they would be blocked from pulling that up in Print Builder. So that lock is just going to automatically exist as long as the screen is up here, but depending on the settings that you have here in the utility, this setting here for prompt to retain lock, you might have noticed earlier I have this turned on to prompt to retain lock for Print Builder templates. So that just means when I exit out of this, whether I've made a change or not, then that will prompt me for whether I want to retain that lock in the database or not. So this enables you to have even longer term locks, even beyond the moment when you have this up on screen. Maybe you want to go to lunch or come back on the next day and make sure that someone else hasn't tried to monkey with this same particular template that you were working on. So if you say yes, then you'll keep that lock in place in the system. So now if a different user tried to come in, let's say we come in as a different user. If I can find one that has password. Okay, so then if we go into Print Builder and try to monkey with that same standard sticker, then it'll say this is currently locked to this particular user. Editing is not allowed until the lock is removed. Would you like to email this particular employee to request a check-in? So you could do that, and you could ask, when are you going to be done with this sticker so I could work on it. So lots of time-saving options that we have there. So that's the locking. Let me pull this back up, describe a few more things. So this locking tab here, this not only displays active locks in the system, but also gives you an historical log of past locks. So you can filter that on the left here. So if we say all, then you can see one of these locks is currently active, but in the past these are all the different times somebody has pulled that up in the system. So you can see who's been messing with particular items in the configuration. Same filtering options here on the left. And then finally, for the settings here, just know you can turn on or off just about everything that I've just described, whether particular types of configuration use the locking mechanisms or not. You could do that maybe for event configuration, but not use the automatic locking for Print Builder templates, something like that. Whether you want to force a particular comment whenever someone checks in a change, or just prompt for a comment but not require them to type something in, you have options for all of that. And then there are various security options in Profile Manager that relate to whether a particular user is able to like forcibly remove a lock in the system, or revert to a past config change, or delete a config change, things like that. There's a new security group in Profile Manager that can track any of these security settings. So that's the new config changes and locking utility. We're excited about this.
One of our new features in version 12 is advanced calibration test points. It's a very large subject, one that we couldn't cover for this particular webinar, the entire thing, but I'll just show you some basics about it, how it works. One of the things, we've always for the last 20 years had our standard test points, and for most things it does a fine job, but customers have asked us for enhancement, things that we could not do in the normal type grid, or was very difficult to do. So let's look just at a basic sample I have here. One of the first things you'll notice is we have different types of calibration test points. So you'll see here I could actually have a calibration. It's a standard calibration. I could have a 17025 base calibration. So that's one of the differences. You can prompt for that when you do the calibration itself. or preset that up. So there's two sections. You'll notice we've done it like an Excel spreadsheet basically. Most people are familiar with that, how that works, formulas, things of that nature. So you'll see there's also two modes. You have a setup mode and what we call event mode. Event mode is what you would see during calibration time. It's very similar to the standard test point section. So some of the differences. So we'll look here. You'll notice there's A, B, C, D, E, F, and what that is it allows you to reference things. Like say if you're going to do Excel, you're going to say equals. Let's say B1, which here is 1 times C1, and it is 0.625. So you'll see you can do formula type things. You can take that, you can drag that down, and it will do the same thing for all of these. So it's kind of neat. Again, if you like Excel, it's a good way to extend your functionality of your standard test points. So each row here or each column, you've got several options. You've got things like hide during event. If this was some field that you only wanted during setup, then you could choose that. Block access during event, and that's simply when I do the event mode, you'll notice it goes into this kind of read-only mode. Next, you've got clear column during event. That would be something like an as found, and there's actually a clear button here, so you can actually see what it would be like, if you're just starting to do a calibration to test it. You've got include column in PDF. The way the PDF or the final results work with this is there's several different ways. You can still map a column to your normal certificates, but there's a new mode where you can simply pick the fields you want to show on the PDF. It will create that PDF and then it will attach it to your certificate header, and then it will renumber your entire certificate document, page number of number, that sort of thing. So then you'll see data mapping here. These are all the fields that you would have available from your standard calibration test points. You have a label that you like for it to be. Then you have column types. So we've got a lot of different column types here. You can have buttons, calculators, memos, editable memos. Just like Excel, you can pretty much put as much text as you want. There's even a rich text format here, temperature, type, time, units of measure, things like that. Then you've got something called a list reference, and what this allows you to do is you'll see on the right hand side here, I can define variables. These variables may or may not show at calibration time, but I can define my own lists. You'll see here I have people, George, Paul, Ringo, John, and you can do things with that, like say I have employee here. List reference is called people, so it looks here for your variable name, sees a list of people. So now when I pull this down, George, Paul, Ringo, John. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and besides that, you can also just hand code the list right in the list reference. Alright, so let's go back here. You've got a default reference. A default reference means something like say for example unit of measure. So when I'm putting in new values here, maybe if I want a default, this is kilowatts, then I could have any new value default to that particular field. Resolution is very similar. You see we have a resolution column here. So for Tolerance Plus, you'll see that it references a column called resolution. So it's 3. If I make it 2, you see everything here. They all have that resolution reference there. So you can see it's pretty flexible in the way things work. Some of the more advanced features. So you'll see as I'm doing this, like let's go into event mode, and if I say do something to fail, you'll see it fails just like a normal calibration would. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes here. In the normal test points, we have very defined, plus and minus tolerance. If it's in between that range, then it's going to pass. If it's outside that range, it's going to fail. Customers have asked for more ways to customize that to determine your own pass-fail. So for each one of these, you can actually do on cell change, row change. In our case, row change is actually what's making the determination. So again, your normal customers would not, or technicians would not see this, but what we've simply done here is this is a using our functions, our scripting functions. We're making the determination of what is failed, what is adjusted, that type of thing. Again, it's a little beyond this scope, but you can pretty much do whatever you like here. Same goes for say tolerance formulas. You'll see here I basically I've got calc tol minus, your tol plus. You can pretty much set any particular tolerance formula that you like through scripting, which is pretty powerful. Then we've got things like initial open, before close. Like let's say, for example, let's say we want to put a button in a particular cell. So I could go to initial open, call an add button. I'm going to save that. Let's come back into it, and you'll see now there is a button in the particular cell that I can click and have it do something. So we'll look at that in just a second. You can also do charting. We have current results chart, trend analysis chart, percent error chart, and then you have a custom chart that you can have occurring during the calibration. You can print those on certs, things of that nature. Our printing options, and then a retest all rows. So down here you'll see something called projects. So occasionally you might want to do something more advanced per test point, like say average some values, or maybe grab a value from an external device. Maybe it's serial, maybe it's a GPIB type device. So you'll see here you can add projects for each test point. So I've just set up a sample one here that I'm going to show, and it's simply a gauge that I've set up. Nothing too fancy here, but this is using our Visual Cal type interface. And let's see here, you can see all the different objects and things you have available to you. Basically, they click the OK button. It says set project result 1.2345, and so that's what it's going to return. So let's close that. So what I've done here, if you looked in our editing when we were talking about the particular, let's see, initial open, we simply added a button that will call that function here. And you'll see we've got a gauge. This is the project that pops up. I hit OK, and it returns the number 12345 and puts it in the particular field. So that's just an example of the power that you can do with this. You can pretty much do anything. So again, that was kind of a quick overview. We'll be at NCSL, and we'll be glad to show you more specifics at our booth. But thanks.
So master types are going to enable you to have a general requirement for a master rather than pointing it to the exact master in the default masters tab on the main screen. So to accomplish this, you'll notice under the add edit system wide we have a new master types add edit. So in the most recent database upgrade, we populate this with just a listing from the industry, but feel free to add to this list or remove any of them that are not appropriate to your usage. So each one of these is going to have a similar format just out of the box. So we're creating a rule just to point to the type of master that we need to fulfill this requirement. And it could be anything that you populate into this filter box, but the ones that we're going to put in by default will have the same format of either the type or the template name equal to this particular master type. And these can be active or inactive, so you can only select from the active master types when you use these on the default masters tab. So each one of these has the same type of format out of the box. So to use that, you go to the default masters tab on the main screen, and what you're used to in the past is just adding a default master by name, and you can still do that, of course. Or the new functionality is you can say add a default master by master type. So when you do that, that just gives you a drop down showing you the master types from that add edit, and you select the name that is the requirement for that particular event. So let's say we need to have an amplifier and maybe also an audio analyzer. So obviously you can see those master type requirements are going to be shown in green to distinguish them from just regular assets on the default masters. So when you run the event, let me start up a calibration event. Then when we get to the specify masters tab in the event, then as you would expect, it'll first add in that one master that we knew already by name. And then there's two master type requirements that we have. We need to select an amplifier and an audio analyzer. So this first search by is going to populate that same filter box from the add edit master types. So either a type or template name equal to amplifier, and it has to be a master in the system. So I've got four that I can choose from. Just double click on one of those. So this second prompt is going to ask me for my audio analyzer. Same kind of format there, and I just pick one, and that's it. So if you ever decide one of these is maybe rejected because of a calibration due date or other master requirement, you can always rerun that same master type rule from the drop down here. Add from master type. So any of the master types that are listed on your default masters step on the equipment view would be listed here and can be rerun. So that's the new master types. Thanks.
So this feature will demonstrate our new IndySoft Spreadsheet option. One of the things that customers have asked for is a way to use Excel, but not have to buy a license of Excel for every single technician. So we've for version 12 we have written our own IndySoft Spreadsheet editor. It is we would say about 90% compatible with most Excel spreadsheets, XLS or XLSX. Some of the things that would not be would be macros and charts, but most everything else should work just like you would normally have working with a spreadsheet. So for example, if you said 10 3 equals A1 times B1, oops, B1 is 30. So just very simple formulas, but all the standard equations you would normally have in Excel are available. You'll see here you've got a lot of table type formatting, insert hyperlinks, you can do pictures, you have data sorting, review capabilities, and zoom in, zoom out, that sort of thing. So you'll see here on the left is just a calibration cert I downloaded off the internet, just a simple Google search. Nothing too fancy here, but just some basic things. So if I open that same document here, you'll see that it looks very similar, pretty much exactly the same. So this is a nice way to be able to perform calibrations, embedded calibrations with existing Excel spreadsheets without having to have an Excel license.
The new IndySoft TechSync utility helps remote technicians to gather all the information that they would need to do work in the field. So from the multi-user database, they can get a current copy of all the configuration, masters, templates, documents, procedures, add edit lists, any equipment that they need related to the company they're about to visit or multiple companies, any related orders. Quickly assemble that into a new single user database, take that into the field, and then any changes that they make are automatically saved to that database, and the moment they get an internet connection, those changes are automatically sent back to the multi-user. So from the multi-user server side, this is done with the new IndySoft Secure server that's running behind the scenes. And from the technician's perspective, they just see a new little application in their system tray for the IndySoft TechSync. So all the technicians need to do is the moment they're ready to go out into the field, they right mouse click on this system tray application and they say create new database, and then from the drop down they select the company they're about to visit or multiple companies. And here you can see this is about 110 assets, almost a couple thousand events here, and they say sync, and that's all they need. So behind the scenes, we're assembling all the latest information from the multi-user database, the current configuration, masters, templates, add-edit lists, related assets that we would need, or any orders. And you can see how quickly all of this is going to sync into a brand new single user database. And we even change the database settings behind the scenes, so you're already pointing to this new database. And if you're curious, we uniquely name it by the company or companies they're about to visit and the date and time. So everything's set up. So now they just launch the single user main screen from their laptop, and they already have all the information that they need to perform their work. So lots of different things can sync automatically, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up multi-user also to demonstrate the information that can sync in both directions. So say we're in single user and we pull up maybe this test 444 asset here, and we're going to change anything about this asset, maybe change the uncertainty to 123. There's no history here, so on this test 44 asset, let's just run a test event. Then let's go to maybe this test 55 asset. That's it's been locked here, so let me try a different one. This one additional 5. Let's change the serial number on this one to test 2. Then from the order system, let's pull up an order I know is incomplete here. Maybe change something in the header of the order. And let's add a scheduled work item for calibration on that test 5 asset, and let's add a charge on that same asset of $2,222. So you can see if you double click on this system tray application, all of it works just on a timer, but you can see in this grid where it's assembling a listing of any changes that have been noted in the single user database. So we changed something we added a charge, we did a scheduled work item, made a change to the header, and then we modified a couple different assets in the system. And so any events are also going to be included with those assets. It's important to note the changes in the work order that it noted are specific to header, charges, and scheduled work. So all of that is sent separately. So multiple users could be out in the field with their own single user databases, all working off the same work order, and those changes are individually sent back and forth. So now as soon as this timer hits in the single user database in 9 seconds or so, all of these changes will be sent back to multi-user if you have an internet connection in the single user database. If not, that's fine. It'll just wait until the next time, but here it's able to send these changes. So now back in the multi-user database, let me illustrate what would go back the other direction. So say we're in the multi-user database and you make a change and add a brand new document, and you want to make sure that everybody out in the field has this new document. So actually, just to be quick here, let me just modify one that's already in here. So any change that you make on this will flag it to be automatically exported back to the single user databases. So this test 222. And then if you make change to any master that's in the system, so let's just go to this test 88 and flag it as being a master, and anything that's changed on that is going to be also automatically sent back to the single user workstations. And then finally, let's go into template editor and make a change on any template in the system. So we'll just find maybe the first one that we see here and make a change on that. So from the server's perspective, it has a similar type of log, and it's noting all the things that have changed that might need to be communicated back to the single user. So it's got its own timer, and we're just going to press this button to go ahead and run the timer on that. So it's sending all of those changes back to any of the single user databases. So the moment they have internet connectivity, not only are they sending their equipment and order changes back to multi-user, they're also receiving any template or document procedure master changes from the multi-user. So I think everything has been synced over. So let's give it a quick look here. So back in the multi-user, let's go to this test 4 asset here, and you can see we've got that uncertainty change. We ran a test event that's come into multi-user. Then we went to this next asset, it was locked. Then we modified the serial number on this test 55. We went into the order system in single user, and we went to this order number 2. We modified the description, we added a scheduled work item and a charge. So all of that has been synced in to the multi-user. And then from the single user's perspective, then we have in the add edit documents, we have this change that we made to test 222, and then we would also have the change to that master and the one template that I'm running out of time to look up. But you get the idea. Things are synced automatically, and then the initial sync of data to get out into the field is exponentially faster than we've had in any past version of IndySoft. So that's the TechSync utility.
One of the new features in version 12 is specifications. Specifications is formerly known as uncertainty attributes. If you've used uncertainty attributes in the past, you'll be used to scripting and accessing values, be it a formula or maybe a direct lookup or an actual table of items. So we basically expounded upon that and now allow you to do things such as manufacturer specifications, and it's used in other places in the software now, not just in the uncertainty module. So again, you can see formula just like we had before, that works the same. You've got lookup. Very similar, you can now specify a text value to return, not only a numeric value. And we also ask for unit measure and resolution for this. You can also do something called a set, which I'll go over in a second. And then now you've got your table and table items. And this is where things differ from the previous uncertainty attributes. For example, you can now do multiple layers in a table. So you're not limited to just one, basically, subset. So in this case, you could look up a value in script and then pass it what we call an array. So you'd pass it manufacturer specs, look up the AC volts, then pass that a value, and then look up inductance, and then pass that a value. And it will return then the inductance value for the manufacturer specs. So you can do a lot of different things with this. And again, it just allows you to do an unlimited amount of levels there. Next is what we call a set, and a set would be something like, say, a gauge block set or maybe a set of weights. If you'd like to, say, for example, record serial numbers, so we could say here gauge block, and we could say start at 1. We're going to say, 5 items. And you'll see here it added 5 gauge blocks, 1, 2, 3, and 4 inches. And then you have what's also called a reference value you can set. So in this case, though, I'm going to say serial number -123, serial number -124, or 125. So if you're recording your serial numbers for each gauge block, then you simply enter this here. And then when you're doing a calibration using the new master types, it can know, all right, I'm using this particular gauge block set. This is the option for that. Then it will pull the serial numbers of the master into the test points automatically for you. So if you ever replace a master in the set and need to change the serial number, you can do so, and then it will just everything else will fall forward. Same as, let's say, error, for example. I can set, say I want to record error of my gauge block set. Do a very similar thing. And now I can actually just record my error. So say the 0.001, 0, 0.00004. So you can keep going with that, and when you do a calibration, it can actually use that error to automatically subtract that value out when you are performing your calibration. So you put in your result, it'll take the particular error of that particular gauge block and automatically subtract it. This can also be used at calibration time to specify, like say for example you're doing a weight set and you're doing multiple weights. You can now pick which weight you're using and then use those in your uncertainty calculations. So if you're combining, say, maybe 3 gauge blocks to form one larger value, then you can record that data, and then your uncertainty can take that into consideration when doing your uncertainty calculations.
There were a few questions that came in that I think can be applicable to the entire group. And Ben, if you don't mind, I'll kind of read some of these off, and if you can address those for the group.
Sure.
But the first one that we saw was in the configuration change utility, is there a way that we can bypass that if we have a scenario where you only have 1 or 2 administrators?
Yes, that's definitely an option on that third tab in the utility there for config changes. There's just an option for whether you want to prompt for that note at all. And then there's a second option for whether you want, if you're prompting for a note, if that note is required. So it could be optional for them to leave that blank, but you could avoid the prompt altogether.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ben. Also had some questions come in regarding the masters. What if you have a scenario where you have multiples of the same master, but of course each one would have different IDs? Is there any way that we can handle that?
Yes, so this would be on the new master types functionality that I demoed there. So you could select that you want multiple items there and list a quantity, and so you would be prompted. So in that same search screen that came up, you could multi-select more than one if you needed that, or you could select just one, and then later on in the calibration you do have access to those same menu items, so you could go back and select additional ones. And another thing we didn't have time to show in the demo is there's new fields in the test point grid for associating back the name of the master type that is used, so you can even be more specific and point each test point back to the master type.
Okay, excellent. So along that same thing then, we had another question come in about what if you have masters assigned to a user? We could, I'm assuming, put that in the filter as well?
Yes, that's a good point. So the master type itself has a filter box that is used to help you select the master. But say in the user location settings, if you have a filter that's set up to help you target the masters for your particular user and location, then those two filters are joined together to help you know exactly how to make that choice.
Okay, great. And I think another question that also came in as we were going over the data sync utility, how far back will we be storing the logs? So when we create the new databases, how far back will we be creating those log files?
Yeah, the logs go back forever. So we don't want there to ever be a mystery on what happened there with the logs. So every 5,000 entries, if you just got into the details, every 5,000 entries, then we'll save that as a new log file. So they're saved actually on the server as a file. And then when we rename those every 5,000, they're named by the date and time. So it's very easy to go back and clean up really old logs there.
Okay, great. Another question that I saw come in, which I'll address this one, Ben, is we had a couple folks ask is if we're running version 8, version 9, version 10, can we upgrade all the way to version 12? Doing that is just fine. Our database upgrade utility will step you through all the way from the current version you're on to the most recent version. So going direct from version 10 to 12, not a problem. 8 to 12, again, not a problem. So that was another question I saw come in a couple of times. And I don't know that I've seen many more come in that I think will be good for the entire group. So in closing, what I would like to do is, again, thank everyone for sticking with us. I also want to remind you that version 12 is going to release in September. September 17th is our scheduled release date on version 12. That's going to have the things that we talked about today in that. And then, of course, that if you are under a current support contract with us, you're fully entitled to version 12. And then the last thing I want to mention is we look forward to seeing some of you next week at the NCSLI conference in Portland. We're going to be at booth number 300. We would love for everyone to stop by and see us. If you're not going to be there, we would still love to get feedback from you. And if there's anything you guys ever need from us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us or you can call and contact us at any time. But thank you all for attending today, and we hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.